Amazing work. Now, of course, I would want to set up my buttons that control which page is displayed. So which items I'm actually displaying. And the way we're going to set this up is where we have the section. At the moment we have just one div for the container. However, right next to it, I would want to display my buttons. And first, I'll set up the button container, but then I'll show you why we would want to render that conditionally. So in here, we're going to go with btn, and then class is container. And for the time being, let's just place a dummy value. I'm just going to say hello world. And everything is beautiful, but check it out. When we're loading, you're also able to see the button container. So if I go to the bigger browser window, and for example, if I'll change the network, and we're going to go here with, I don't know, fast 3G, I think that should be good. At the moment, I have this loading, but I also have the hello world. Now, what that means is that I'll display my buttons even before I have the loading. And that's not something that I would want. Instead, I'm just going to say here conditionally that I only would want to display btn container if we're not loading. Now, since we have done that already quite a few times, I'm going to give you a challenge. So at the moment, pause the video and set it up how you would have that conditional rendering. And then once you're done, just double check with my solution. So hopefully you were able to set it up. And we simply say, if we're not loading, only then I would want to display my btn container. So I move this into my conditional render, and then you'll check it out that I only have this loading. And then once I'm done loading, then I have my buttons. So that's what I would want to do. I'm going to close this out and I'm going to refresh so we don't have that fast 3G. And now, of course, I would want to iterate over my data. Please keep in mind, we're not iterating over the followers. We're iterating over the whole list. Okay. That is very important because this is that array of arrays. And instead of showcasing 9 buttons that just reflect that each item, I would want to reference, well, how many pages I have. So in here, if I have 20 pages, that's why I would want to display 20 items. And then remember, this data, that is that array of arrays. Okay, so hopefully that is clear. And inside of this button container, like I said, I would want to iterate over that list. So we're going to say here data, then we're iterating over. But I can tell you right away that we actually don't care about that array. Because remember, it is array of arrays, and then each array represents some kind of page. But I don't really care about those items. What I care about is the index, because that index will help me to change, well, which page I'm actually rendering. So I'm going to go with return. And for the time being, let's just go with simple return with our button. For the key, we'll just use the index. And then I'm going to go with class name button. So class name, page, and then hyphen btn. And as far as the value, let's just say button. We save, and we should see all of these buttons. And again, the amount of buttons will depend how many pages we have. The more pages we have, the more buttons we'll have. The less pages, hopefully you get the gist. So now, of course, I can display the buttons, but there's few things that I would want to fix. First of all, instead of this hard-coded button, I would want to display, well, which page actually that button references. And in order to do that, of course, I would want to look for my index. Remember, I don't care about the item. I don't care about array of arrays. I don't care about that specific array in that array of arrays, but I care about the index of that array. That's why here, as far as the value, I'm going to go with index. Now, one small gotcha is that way I'm going to get page 0. Now, I don't think that makes sense, even though, of course, in JavaScript arrays are 0 index based, but I think it would be a better setup if we would say, yeah, this is page number 1. How will we do that? Well, simply we go +1, and then we display page number 1 all the way to page number 12 in our case. So that's a good start. And now, of course, I would want to set up a function that controls, well, which page I'm showing. So followers from which page. And I'm simply going to call this handle page const and then handle page. And as far as the logic, it's not going to be that challenging. We're simply going to say handle page. We're going to be looking for the index that is coming, of course, from the button. And then we're just going to go set page and then pass index. Remember, by default, this is 0. And then, of course, each page has its unique index. So once we click on a button, we'll grab the index and then we'll pass it into set page. We scroll down a bit and now let's set up our logic where, of course, once I click on a button, I would want to pass that specific index. So we'll go with on, click, and that one is equal to my arrow function, of course, because I don't want to invoke it right away. And I'm going to go with handle page, and then I'll pass in the index, whatever it is, whether that is 0 all the way to 11 in our case. So once I navigate to the bigger screen, now check it out. We can click, but nothing is happening. Interesting. Well, why nothing is happening? Well, because even though we changed the index, at the moment, we're not re-rendering anything. Because we have the use effect that runs, we set followers equal to the page, and that's it. So even though the index is changing, we're not really setting it to a new page. Because here, the dependency array has just loading. And I can clearly showcase that. Where if we go to inspect and if we'll take a look at the components, notice how these values are changing. So yeah, we're changing that index, but for some reason, we're not getting that specific page. And we simply fix that by adding one more item in my dependency array, where I have my use effect, and now I would want to run that use effect every time the page changes. So when the page changes, of course, I'll check for loading first, which we're not loading anymore. So this is going to be false. And then I'll go with set followers, then have my whole list, and then just display that certain list. Okay. That array in that item. And now, of course, these values will represent that page. So in here, check it out. Once you click, now the value is changing, and also you're displaying different items. Because now in that array of arrays, well, you're accessing that specific array, whether that is array 0 or 1 or 2 or whatever. And we're almost done with our page buttons. What is missing, though, is the active button. So when I change the index, I also would want to change which is the active button, because I think that would be a better user experience. And we're simply going to do that by setting up the class name active btn dynamically. So initially we set this up as a simple string, and now we're going to go back to JavaScript land, and we're going to say that yes, we would want to always display the page button, but I'll have to set it up to the template string, and we'll set up our expression where I'm going to say if index matches my current page value, then I would want to add active btn class dynamically. So we're going to go with our ternary operator again, and we're going to go with active btn class, and we only add it if the index matches the pages. If not, then we simply return a null. And what you'll notice that once we load, notice the button with index of 0, of course, matches the page, correct? Since the page is 0. And as we're going to be changing this in our handle page, also the class will move from one button to another one. If you definitely want to see that in action, just go to elements, then main, then we're looking for followers, then button container, and notice how the first one has this active button. So as I'm going to be clicking, then I'm going to be changing the value of the button that has the active button. So not only I'm changing the pages, I'm also displaying, well, which page I'm actually rendering.